Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. I'm pleased to introduce Dave Fischer, President of Liftoff Strategic Advisors. Winning U.S. government contracts can be transformative for startups and technology companies, but crafting a successful proposal requires a very specific set of strategies and best practices. Today, Dave will introduce us to the fundamentals of competing for government work, sharing practical guidance to help you improve your proposal success rate and better navigate this important market. Dave brings over 40 years of experience spanning astrophysics, research management, strategic planning, and global business development. He holds a BA in physics from the University of Chicago, is a certified PMP, and serves on several advisory boards, including the Colorado Space Business Roundtable and SEDS USA. Please join me in welcoming Dave Fischer.
Thank you, Ravi. Welcome, everyone. I'm really excited to talk to you this afternoon about winning government business. I have a slide deck that I will work through, and I can also make that available. I'll send that to Ravi and make that available for anybody who would like to follow up with that afterwards. I think for the size of group we have, definitely I want us to have a conversation. And so I really welcome questions and comments. But considering the size of the group, I'll ask that you put those into chat. And then when we get through the presentation, we'll return and try to spend about half of our time on a Q&A session. So with that, an echo. That's bad news. Is there an echo from anyone else?
No.
I'm not hearing an echo.
Okay. We will push forward then, and we will see if I remember how to share the screen. This is probably going to be the most difficult part of the presentation here. All right. Now, let me put this on to, okay. Can I get a thumbs up if you're seeing a slide and it's in slide sorter mode? Awesome. All right, thank you very much. So in the spirit of I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. Here's what we're going to cover today. In the topic of doing business with the federal government and proposal best practices. First, why listen to me? My friend George was one of the first arrivers to the session today. And he said, well, why should we listen to you, Dave? I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. And then we're going to talk about what do we mean by the federal government? What do we mean by proposals? Where does this thing called business development fit in? And we'll talk about things like capture plans and the concept of a position to win. We'll talk about process. And one thing that I certainly hear from a lot of my small and early stage clients is we're too small for process. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then we'll talk about crafting a winning proposal. It might seem weird that that comes so late in the conversation, but the foundation that we're going to set is actually really important to talk about that crafting a winning proposal. We'll talk about proposal critique, or what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I cannot stress enough the importance of not just writing a proposal, but having someone critique your proposal. We'll talk about that in some depth. We'll wrap up with, I'll share some resources.
Moving up the ladder to success is challenging.
Q&A.
You have to keep trying, keep fighting, keep overcoming.
And okay, there we go. So why listen to me? So who am I? I'm Dave Fischer. I offer strategy and business development and proposal services, mostly to early stage companies that are trying to get into commercial markets. But having said that, selling commercially into the US government is a really important topic for these early stage companies. Um, I'm a consultant because I retired, and you don't really retire from the space industry. Prior to retiring and hanging up my shingle, I led the BD and sales organizations for two international space companies that were expanding into the United States market. Prior to that, I worked several years in a corporate development role with a legacy space company here in Colorado, leading captures and proposals at the enterprise level. I've done NASA, Department of Defense, the Intel community, as well as the National Science Foundation. In fact, working on proposals in the 80s and 90s, one of which was a proposal that ended up with the University of Chicago headquartering an effort to build astrophysical observatories at the South Pole Station. I serve on advisory boards, as Robbie mentioned earlier. And just one important thing, too, is I approach business development, sales, proposals from a technical background. I have a degree in physics, and I will just share a little bit of a bias I have when hiring business development and sales people in the space industry, which is people with technical backgrounds tend to be the most successful in doing business development and sales in the space industry. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is. So, if we're talking about winning federal government, let's talk about what we mean by the federal government. We all talk about the US government, but it's important to realize as you're trying to win business with the government that it's not a monolith. There are different parts, different elements, different agencies, all of which have different approaches. And you have to remember that there are people involved in all of these organizations. So NASA, Department of Defense, they both operate in space. And by the way, I realize not everybody here is interested in the space market, but this is where my expertise is. And so I do tend to base my conversations around that. But a lot of what we'll talk about here is applicable across any sort of government agency. But as an example, both NASA and Department of Defense operate in space, but they have very different missions and very different procurement strategies. Within the Department of Defense, you have DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, Space Systems Command, and an organization called DIU, the Defense Innovation Unit. Very different procurement approaches from each of those. If you like, in the Q&A, we can dig into a little more about those differences. The review process is different across these groups as well. There are, however, some things in common. In every case, you're writing a proposal that's going to be read by people. And these are people, depending on where they are within the government, within these agencies, they have varying capabilities. They have varying time pressures. Sometimes they're contractors. Sometimes they are civil servants doing these reviews. A little bit of an aside, I expect that AI will have an impact on proposal reviews. I think it's too early to tell exactly what that impact will be or how it will manifest, but certainly we're all familiar with the idea that we open up a long email and there's an AI agent at the top of it telling us what the summary of the email is. This may come into play. I would be shocked, actually, if it didn't come into play in proposal reviews. In the end, after the reviewers are done, the source selection authority makes the decision based on the results of the review. And all of these folks are working, and again, remember, we're talking strictly about US government proposals. They're all working according to rules and regulations, notably the federal acquisition regulations and the defense federal acquisition regulations, as well as their own agency rules. And one last thing to bear in mind as we're talking about the federal government is that it is subject to a lot more volatility these days than it has been in the past. If you're in the areas where you're relying on SBIRs or STTRs, you've certainly been impacted by the volatility in authorization and funding for SBIRs over the past year.
Sure, they've got.
Is there a question? We'll go ahead and proceed then. So we talked about what do we mean by the federal government. Now the question is, what do we mean by proposals? The government can buy things, goods, services through a lot of different channels. You're probably familiar if you work with legacy companies, especially with the RFPs, requests for proposal. There are BAAs, broad area announcements, which are opened by an agency and which you can propose to a general topic for an extended window of time. SBIRs, the Small Business Innovative Research Grants, these really critical to innovation with small, early stage startup companies. STTRs, similar to SBIRs and involving a university partner. Request for quote. Commercial solutions openings, OTAs, which is other transactional authorities. Over the past 10 years, you've really seen a shift within Department of Defense in particular for trying to do more commercial approaches. They tend to use things like these commercial solutions openings. That's the word or the phrase that the Defense Innovation Unit uses for their proposals. So the traditional procurement routes, those are usually for cost type contracts. They're multi-volumes, they're scored, they have a very rigid scoring structure. They are very prescriptive. The government tells you in detail what requirements your solution must meet. And as I said, there's a growing use of more commercial or quasi-commercial approaches now. And I think the really way to think about this is the US government trying to understand how to come to industry and say, I need a solution that does this versus I need a solution that meets these requirements. So it's more flexible. And the government is experimenting with different approaches with varying degrees of success. Two current initiatives within DoD, the Arsenal Freedom, the Golden Dome, both assert the use of more commercial approaches. So really paying attention to that to see how that pans out. And one of the really great things for small businesses and early stage companies is that these proposals don't have to be multi-volume, 500-page proposals. They can be shorter. They can be in the forms of white papers or even PowerPoints. Now let's talk a little bit about business development. This is near and dear to my heart, and I think that many small companies, many startups don't want to hire a business development person early in the formation of the company because they're focused on building the company. They're focused on building the tech. And that's great. You don't need to hire a business development person or team at an early stage company, but you have to make sure that you're doing the business development function. This is critically important, as I'm sure you all know for any business, but really with the government, it is really critical to understand needs and to really know the people that you're talking to. So who are your prospective customers? The government, in other words, that monolith, is not a prospective customer. You need to really understand which agency, which department, which people are you selling to? And with that comes really learning what they need. Starting points for the challenges and the procurements that are upcoming are usually public information, right? We're not talking about classified work here. These are NASA or unclassified DoD things that you're likely to write an SBIR for. You can do that homework. You can find this information. It is published because it is the government. You need to know their budget. And this one is also a lot of information which is published. So you could do your homework first. Developing relationships with the right people in your prospective customer organization. This is just so critical. Writing blind SBIRs is okay. It's a strategy. It's a choice. It's going to be a lot less successful than writing SBIRs into a customer organization that already knows you and that you already know what they're looking for and what they're trying to solve. Showing solutions to your customer before procurements hit the street is also really important. In the traditional or the legacy space industry, that's called shaping the procurement. But showing your customers that you have solutions to things really helps position you in a position where you're in a better position. Which the last point here brings about putting together a capture plan is really critical for anything that you're going after, whether it's a big proposal or a white paper or PowerPoint, or for that matter, just a conversation with someone in the government. And the capture plan really establishes what your position to win is. In the legacy industry, there's another phrase that's closely related to position to win, which is called price to win. And price to win is essentially an estimation of what the lowest price you could bid is that will win. It assumes all offers are technically the same. Position to win is a broader approach to this. I think that actually Lockheed Martin was one of the first to popularize this idea of a position to win. It really is encompassing what your offer is, both in price, in the technical solution, the capabilities that you're offering, the timeline that you're on, the entire package. Understanding that position to win before you go in to write a proposal is just so important because it keeps you from going down blind alleys when you're doing a proposal writing, and it keeps you on track to be putting your best proposal in front of your customers. All of which brings up the idea of process. And I hear we're too small for process from some startups. And my counter to that is you're not. You're too small to have bad process because bad process is wasteful. Good process that is useful to small companies pursuing business, and not just government business, but any business, should be focused on two really critical things. What opportunities do you want to target? And how are you going to spend your very limited resources going after those opportunities? So without process, one might shotgun it and just respond to everything and hope that something comes up. With some process in place, you're able to understand better which opportunities are aligned with your capabilities and with your growth strategy so that you're able to target those. I think that business development in this process needs to be held accountable for developing a list of who your customers are, who your prospective customers are, and prioritize it. I think that BD function, and again, you don't need to have a BD person, but that function has to be something that you're performing in a small company. It needs to inform your capture approach. In other words, your capture approach needs to know from your BD function who's buying it, what their pain points are, what their budget is, what they're really trying to get. You build a capture approach that puts you in the strongest position to win, and then you build your proposal based on that capture approach. And that's how you craft your best offer. It's this entire process from knowing your customer with the BD side through a capture plan and into what your proposal looks like. How you do this, of course, depends on what you're doing, what your company looks like, and especially who's on your team, what your resources are, and what your growth strategy is. So the quote, "You have your way, I have mine. As for the right way, the correct way, the only way," it doesn't exist. You have to do the process that's right for your company But having no process is really a recipe for failure. And finally, we'll get to the idea of crafting a winning proposal. And we're focusing, remember, on government. Compliance is the key. If you submit a non-compliant proposal, you're likely going to lose. The reviewers will have a score sheet, usually. And they're going to use that score sheet to rate proposals. And they're going to rank your proposal against the 20 or 30 other proposals that are on that reviewer's desk. It's really important to make it easy for these reviewers to score your proposal. So, what are some things to bear in mind while you're doing that? First of all, remember that a proposal is a sales document, not an engineering document. It's not a systems engineering report. It is meant to persuade the reader to select your solution, your product, your company. Incorporating win themes and emphasizing discriminators. So, what are win themes and discriminators? These are things that really should be laid out in the capture plan so that they're established at the outset and they run throughout your entire proposal. The win theme might be that you are going to be the supplier who provides a solution to the government the fastest, or the cheapest, or the best. Discriminators are really what separates you from your competitors. It's a good idea to have a really good understanding of what your competitors' strengths are as well, so you understand what to emphasize in your proposal based on what will win against what they're emphasizing in their proposal. Knowing the difference between benefits and features. This is a very interesting topic, and it comes to the first point, remembering that you're writing a sales and not an engineering document. The features of a solution are really the engineering specs, if you will, the technical specs of your solution. They're about you talking about your solution. Benefits are you talking about what the customer is going to get from this solution. Proposals should be written well. Again, just remember that these reviewers are reviewing a lot of proposals. And if you make it a slog for them to get through, you're probably going to get rated a little lower. And, you know, a lot of this sounds like sixth grade English composition, but it's important to go back and actually remember these things and set a standard, especially if you have multiple people contributing to proposal writing. Using thesis statements, using active voice, using crisp sentences, everything that makes it easy to read. And just as importantly, write logically. Tell your story clearly. Make sure that the logic of your argument is flawless. Tell your reader explicitly why they should select you. And I think this is perhaps one of the most difficult things in the space industry, at least, where a lot of writers wish to lay out all of the benefits of their solution in a way that they expect the reader to be able to tie it together and understand why the solution is so awesome. Don't do that. Tell them why it's so awesome. Because again, remember, they're reading a lot of proposals. And continuously, as the proposal is being put together, ask if it's aligned with the capture approach. I have seen proposals go off the rails when they really stopped being aligned with the capture approach, and it is a lot of work to put it back in the box. By the way, that's not to say that sometimes halfway through the proposal, you realize there's a better way to do it. And at that point, has to be a considered decision if you're going to put the additional resources in to change course that late. And of course, the further into the proposal it is, the more effort it is to change course. Finally, some key decisions in building your capability to write proposals. Develop a consistent approach. So everybody on your team who takes part in writing a proposal, and a lot of small companies, everyone is involved in writing a proposal. They know what to expect, proposal to proposal. That's not to say that you can't do some continuous improvement as you're writing the proposals, but have a general plan in place, a folder structure online where everybody understands proposal to proposal. That folder structure is going to be the same. They know where their contributions go. They know where any elements they need to review are. They understand what the process looks like when something is in process, when something is done. And finally, identifying and nurturing your strong writers is really important as well, because you'll figure out who your strong writers are after one or two proposals, nurturing them, getting them to be a solid, reliable proposal writer for you is going to be really important as you grow and as you build bigger and more complex proposals. Finally, proposal critique. So remember, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I am an incredibly strong advocate for having a plan in place for reviewing your proposals. It can be formal. It can have a lot of milestones. It can have a lot of named reviews. These are the notorious color team reviews with pink teams and red teams, et cetera. Or it can be informal. I don't really care for small companies exactly where they align on this spectrum of formality or informality, as long as there is some review. And just as it's important to have writers that you're identifying and nurturing, having reviewers you're identifying and nurturing is important to do. If you're asked to be one of those reviewers, it's really important to review a proposal like you're the government reviewer. Go back to that image of a government reviewer with 20 or 30 proposals on their desk. Make sure yours is going to stand out. It's going to be easy to read, easy to score. It's not going to confuse you. It's not going to tire you out because it's got terrible writing. It's going to be crisp and fun to read. When you're reviewing it, even though you're part of the company, you have to take the mindset that you don't know the company. You don't know the tech. Assume that you don't have that background knowledge. You have to judge the proposal on the merits of what's written, what's in front of you. If something about the company structure or about the technology or about the costing isn't clear, this is the time to bring it up while that proposal is still not submitted. Check it for compliance. If it's not compliant, it won't win. And if you find mistakes in the physics, the logic, or the costing, it won't win. Dan Golden was the administrator of NASA in the 90s, early 2000s, and he is still active advising startup companies and advising investors. And the first question that he asks a company that comes in is, explain the physics of your solution. You should be able to do that in every proposal that you have as well. In the end, part of the point of being a reviewer on a proposal is, if there's bad news to hear about the proposal, it's better for you as a reviewer to give it inside your company so you can fix it, rather than hearing about it from the customer when they notify you that you didn't win the proposal. Resources. There are a lot of consultants out there. I'm not going to advocate that you should or shouldn't go out and bring consultants in to augment your team. But I will tell you, if you are going to bring a consultant in to augment a team, especially to win government proposals. Choose a consultant that understands your vision and is aligned with your values. You are going to have no success if you bring in somebody who isn't aligned with your company that way. As you want to develop internal efforts to build good proposals and review good proposals, out of all of the providers out there, I've always been impressed with the Shipley Group. They actually offer really good training courses. They also offer a proposal guide, Shipley Proposal Guide. They charge $99 for it, and it really is worth it. I'm so old that I remember when the Shipley Guide was free, but it is really what a lot of space companies structure their proposal approach and their reviews around. And finally, one book that I love to recommend. It was written in 1983 by Norm Augustine, who was at the time the chair of Lockheed, and it is a very revealing look inside government proposals and some of the absurdities and silliness that's involved in it. And it's still sadly relevant today. We don't have to submit paper copies of proposals to the government anymore. They've figured out how to do it electronically. But one of the points he makes early in the book is that the weight of the proposals and the number of copies that they had to provide for a helicopter RFP weighed more than one of the helicopters did, and that's sort of the tongue-in-cheek approach that book takes. It's a great read, and I do highly recommend it. With that, here's my contact information. Always happy to chat with people, and we can go from here to Q&A if I can figure out how to get back there. Stop sharing, and I can see everybody again. So, okay, the only thing in the chat is, I don't see any questions. Does anyone have questions? Let's just open it up. It's actually a pretty manageable size group. Cameron, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you for a very interesting presentation. At the early part of your talk, you mentioned about the need versus the requirements, and that they're not the same. If you don't mind dissecting that a little bit, does it mean that the funding agencies aren't able to express their needs properly, or yeah, anyway, just I want to understand that comment a bit better.
Yeah. So really, I think that there's two things to talk about there, Cameron. One is that I think that the government, as it's shifting to try to do more commercial or quasi-commercial procurements, is focusing more on asking industry to meet a need rather than to meet a requirement. And so that might be, I need to be able to track. Let's say it's an imaging system. I need to be able to track activity on the ground in this area at this time, versus the more old school approach of doing a cost type contract, where the government would instead of saying, here are my needs to industry, they would say, here are my needs to an internal group within the government, who would then design a solution and derive a set of requirements that the solution must meet. And then they would say, industry, here are the requirements I have for a system. So that's one of the distinctions. Another distinction in terms of the business development effort is having those conversations with the government, whichever agency, whichever element, whichever people those are, to understand what they're really trying to get to, what their pain points are, what they need a solution for, what they need a solution for today, and providing them with ideas to those solutions and helping to shape that next procurement when the government comes out. There's an old saying, I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. If you're surprised by the RFP, you've already lost, right? So you need to be part of the process before that request for proposal or a BAA or however the government is coming to ask for a solution from industry. You need to be part of the conversation before that. That's the real importance of the business development function. Did that answer your question, Cameron?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let's see here.
There's a few more questions in the chat.
Yes. Okay. How to identify who to pitch to in a massive organization like the DoD? That is an awesome question. Let's think first about the easy, maybe not easy, but the accessible online homework that one can do. Most of the government is quite transparent. You can go onto websites for different government agencies to find out who the procurement authorities are. You can look at the authorized budgets for government agencies to see what Congress is directing them to procure and what the budget is to procure. So there's a lot of the homework that you can do in advance. In terms of really finding out who the people are, it helps to know somebody who already knows that, right? And if you're talking about the Department of Defense in particular, there are a lot of recently retired O6s or general officers who want to help small businesses. They want to help industry make the connections into DoD. So there are a lot of what I want to say, a lot of accessible events that are available. In Colorado Springs, there's an organization called Catalyst Campus, which is a startup accelerator that is associated with Space Force. And that's an opportunity to get in and talk to people, including the procurement officials and the technical experts within Space Force right here in Colorado. I'm assuming this is mostly a Colorado crowd that we have here. But finding the people who can also have the conversations, those recently retired officers who know who the procurement people are. Some of the best hires that I ever made in running a business development group were those recently retired officers who knew who to talk to and who to have the conversations with. Now, how do you find those? You network. You use LinkedIn. LinkedIn is it's a great source for data mining. And you attend as many networking opportunities as you can. Here in Colorado, there's Colorado Space Business Roundtable events. There are the Advanced Space sponsored happy hours that occur at least every other month. So really getting out there and talking to people tends to be, in my opinion, easy here in Colorado if you just start to make that first in. And I'm happy to share information about both of those opportunities offline as well. Show contact info again. Oh, you're asking me to share the screen again. I can do that.
I can also send the contact information out when I send out the slide deck and the video.
That would be awesome. Thank you, Ravi. Do you have any specific bits of advice or words of wisdom for NSF proposals? Yeah, so I've had experience making proposals into NSF from academia. I've also had experience with some small startups proposing into NSF and also doing NSF's small business accelerator program, which is I think called Inspire. Um, so tips, words of wisdom. Again, be compliant. Be compliant. Be compliant. That is probably the most important one because of the federal acquisition regulations that NSF must comply with. Your proposal has to be compliant in order for them to score it well. I think for NSF as well, it's going to depend very much on which division or which office within NSF you're proposing to. And that was Emma. Emma, were you thinking about applying from a university perspective or from a small business perspective?
We would be applying through the University of Colorado Boulder.
Okay, yeah. Um, it's been a while since I've been in academia, Emma, but I think definitely with NSF, you want to be sure that you have stellar principal investigators on the team.
Okay, that's helpful.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Let's see, foreign companies submitting to BARDA. Let's see, Kristen, that's yours. I'm not familiar with BARDA. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, it's the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
they're usually looking at health related.
Gotcha. Yeah. Uh, I'm not going to mislead you by pretending to have knowledge I don't. I'm afraid that one is way outside my sphere of knowledge, Kristen.
No worries. What about just foreign companies in general?
Yeah. So and again, I come at it from the perspective of space companies, which is an interesting place to be when you're talking about non-U.S. companies dealing with U.S. government contracts. So there are a lot of ITAR regulations that come into play with space companies because just about everything in space is on the munitions list. So one of the most important things to do for a foreign company is to find a U.S. company that is able to partner with it, and then to put into place all of the compliance with ITAR, the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, um, um, so that the so that so that everything is done in a compliant and legal way with the government. But also, I feel that whenever there's a foreign company involved in a U.S. government proposal, you also have to have a super compelling offer because a government contracting officer is going to look at one proposal with U.S. companies and another proposal that involves foreign companies and realize that there's going to be a lot more work involved in making that contract work. And so the offer really, in my view, needs to be so compelling that they will be glad to do all of the extra work that's required to operate with a foreign company. Now, outside of the space market, where ITAR is such a big concern, I can only imagine it's easier, and I've never had the pleasure of doing it outside of the space market.
Very good. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So there's a question from Chris speaking about the strategic breakthrough allocation. And Chris, you've stumped me. I don't know what the strategic breakthrough allocation is.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone else does either just yet. It's part of the new reauthorization of the SPIR, and it's something where they have an opportunity to. I'm just going to read it here right now. Agencies more than 100 million annual SPIR obligations will be able to do this strategic breakthrough. It's up to $30 million for a small business over 48 months, and it needs matching funds from a private agency. I'm going to drop the link right there.
Awesome.
This is just one that I grabbed inside government contracts. I just Googled it, but it just seems like a significant opportunity, from what those big changes will be once they're made into law, at this time. So I think right now, from what I've talked to other folks, it's the agencies are kind of scratching their head also and trying to figure out what to do with this now that the legislators told them what to do. And so,
yes.
there's going to be a lot of rewriting of a couple of these RFPs and RFAs coming up soon. But
Indeed. Well, Chris, thank you for that. That's a new one to me. So thank you for teaching me something here today. There is, I can see one person on the call here who, when anybody asks me who an SBIR expert is, I point them to him, and that's Ed Case. Ed, could I invite you to come off mute, and maybe you could say a few words about the strategic breakthrough allocation?
So I'm not up on that terminology yet either. So I'm kind of slowly sifting through things as SPIR reauthorization slowly grinds through the process. So I've been trying not to go down too many rabbit holes till there's a bill out there. And there is now, but I am not familiar with that particular part of the program just yet.
Super. Thank you, Ed. Yeah, well, I guess this goes back to the point I made on one of the earlier slides about the increased level of volatility within the government now as well. There's one. Let me run to John's question, and then Cameron, I see your hand up. I'll come to you. It says, can you talk large prime subcontracting plans, the potential for small business entry into large acquisitions, not set aside for small business? Yeah, absolutely. So I think if you're a small company looking to scale up and you're looking at some of the legacy primes, many of the same rules that apply to doing government work will apply to working with, say, a Lockheed, a Northrop, a Boeing. And the reason for that is that the legacy primes are structured very similarly to their biggest customer, the U.S. government. And whether that's a portion of the company working for NASA or working for DoD, they are structured like them. They are also structured in such a way that they need to hold all of their subcontractors to standards that the government is setting. And so think of it as trying to remember my math. Is that the commutative property or the transitive property, working for the government through Lockheed, for instance, is in many ways, from the perspective of a small company, the same as working directly for the government. You're going to have to meet similar compliance requirements. You're going to have the same sort of business development that's going to be required of going into the government, understanding who the decision makers are and what those decision makers are looking for. One question that I think every small company faces when they look at doing business with a legacy large prime, as well as, do they want to do it? And what do they need to watch out for? And there are a lot of horror stories that you'll hear from small companies who feel that they have been mistreated by large primes. And so I would recommend that if you're considering working with a large prime, you think about some of the same things I talked about. If you're considering working and bringing a consultant in to augment your team, which is it aligned with your values? Is it aligned with your mission? Is it aligned with your company? Um, Now, I think that finding ways to work with big primes is a terrific way to scale and grow a small company. And if you're a small company, hopefully you've thought about what your exit looks like. If your exit is to be acquired by a large company within I don't know, a 3 to 5 year period, for instance, it's really a spectacular idea to start making those strategic relationships with those primes who might be a source of an acquisition. Cameron, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Do you have any guidance on the uncertainty that comes with reviewer feedback? Particularly when the initial set of reviewers are even a different set of people than the final people who decide.
Interesting. Do you have a particular agency in mind, maybe?
Well, I've heard that NSF it may have a first set of reviewer people giving you the feedback to be a different set of people than the deciders.
Okay. Interesting. So I haven't run across what I've run across is um, uh, when I worked with a legacy large prime. I've run across reviews back from DoD and from NASA that were the same reviewers. It's I I always encourage you to get a debrief, but it is hard to get a substantive debrief because all of these agencies are well aware that one option a losing proposal has is a challenge to that, right? And so they're very careful, and there are very strict guidelines about what they can and can't talk about. And sadly, that means that you don't get a lot of great feedback. Feedback, in my experience, in that scenario, working for a big prime and getting feedback from NASA, DoD, it tends to fall along the lines of if there was a non-compliance, that stands out. And then what those organizations tend to do is they classify elements of your proposal as a major strength, a minor weakness, or a major weakness. And they will go through those with you, and you can sort of interpret based on which category something ended up in, where you should be paying attention to improving proposals in the future. But it is hard. It is hard. Now, working for smaller companies, I've had reviews from Defense Innovation Unit, from DIU. And those, because the proposal process with DIU is markedly different than it is for a program of record, you tend to get a little more insight. And this is just, it's an experience of a small data set. So I don't know if this is true overall, but in the small data set I've found that I've gotten a lot better, a lot more actionable feedback from those. But it's more of an art than a science, I guess, would be really how I would categorize it.
Thank you.
Awesome. My good friend and neighbor, George Powell, has said, if you run out of questions, I have a few. So let's open it up. George.
Yeah, you talked a lot about compliance. And are there compliance matrices that you can find for the general acquisition requirements? And then how do you put together a compliance matrix for the specific RFQ or RFI that you're responding to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not aware of any sort of generalized one, George, but but in my experience, when we get an RFP, say, one of the first things that you do, it's called stripping the RFP. And you pull out all of the phrases that contain the magic word shall. And those are the things that you must comply with, right? And it's relatively straightforward. And in fact, I would bet you that Gemini or Claude or ChatGPT can strip and create a compliance matrix for you of an RFP. Nowadays, back in the olden days, somebody had to sit around at a computer and spend a day stripping it all out. But it is so important to make sure that if the word shall ever appears, you really pay attention to it. And then in the technical requirements, usually those are provided in a table format from the government in the proposal. So that's what you need to make sure you comply with. And you can say, well, that seems obvious, but I've certainly seen plenty of examples where it wasn't, because someone thought, the government's asking for this, but I know what they really need is this. And so I'm going to give them something they're not asking for. And I guarantee you that loses. So I'm keeping an eye on the time. I think we have 2 minutes left. So let me see if there are any other chats here. Let's see. Ed, thank you for that resource for DoD contracts. That's awesome. I guess with that, we'll call it. And I know that Ravi has recorded this, so you can find it later. I will share the slides with Ravi, who then can share that with all of you, as well as my contact information again. And I want to just thank you for being here and listening to this conversation and contributing to a nice dialogue.
Thanks for speaking, Dave, and thank you all for coming. I will send out all the information. Have a good day.
Super. Bye-bye.